G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle. Today we're looking at what broke the fans, Codex, Craftworld, Eldar, or just Eldar for short. Before I start the video, for new subscribers and viewers, or those who haven't seen these videos before, What Broke the Fans is the series name. It's the name of the playlist that I put these videos into. It's not a literal case of the books or models for a faction somehow being so terrible that the fans snap. Instead, the series is a retrospective look at how a faction began, evolved, and ended up as of the time of recording the video. With this in mind, to start, we're going all the way back to Rogue Trader. In the lead up to filming this particular episode, I tracked down each and every mainline 40k Eldar resource from the 1980s up until 2014, from which point, on the detachments and data slates of 7th edition and 6th edition, it all became too much, and honestly, they didn't add anything to my research, so I didn't pull any pictures from them. So, in Rogue Trader, we're first introduced to the Eldar as the futuristic Space Elves faction, which is basically what they were, and they're very similar to actually what we recognise now, with the exception of the human Eldar half-breeds, which were a thing back then. Interestingly, even on page 1, the pieces begin to fall into place, with the Fall, the Chaos Gods, the Demon Worlds, Eldar Gods. It's all established here on this first page. We also get some pretty neat artwork as well. The second page introduces us to their psychic potential, the Spirit Stones, and their heightened emotions, as well as Wraithbone and Bone Singing, the process by which the Eldar quite literally grow their technology. It's interesting stuff. Unlike the Space Marines of Rogue Trader, whose Primarchs were just a rank of generals, whom were also just basic humans, the Eldar as a faction start out of the gate fleshed out, and no great retcon actually took place in 2nd and 3rd edition in order to make the faction we know today. A few pages down, we meet the Craftworlds and then the Aspect Warriors. Interestingly, the Aspects described are only the 6 common ones we know of today. The Dire Avengers, the Howling Banshees, the Striking Scorpions, the Swooping Hawks, the Fire Dragons, and the Dark Reapers. The book does, however, take pains to point out that other aspects are not covered in this list, which remain to be described as new models are released, and that the 6 listed aspects are only listed as they are common to almost all Craftworlds. To this day, only 2 additional aspect types have been fleshed out, being the oft-forgotten Shining Spears and the Forge World exclusive Shadow Spectres, which is something I'll come back to later. Apparently, the Crimson Hunters are also an aspect type. However, I don't really feel this, because an aircraft is very different to the idea of a semi-sentient suit of armour, which is passing down through time, imbuing the wearer with the spirit of the original owner. And considering that the Crimson Hunters are likely physically destroyed whenever they're lost, being blown apart in void combat or in the atmosphere of planets, it's very hard to pass on something which no longer exists. Mention is also made of the Eagle Pilot from the BFG novel Shadowpoint, the Ebon Talons from Asurman, the Hand of Asurman, and lastly, the Slicing Orbs of Xandros. I too have no idea what the hell these are, but according to places like 1D4chan, I'm not the only one who actually remembers them, because other people do too, and nobody else seems to figure out what the hell they are. The art style and play style of the Eldar and Rogue Trader era, it's almost identical to the miniatures of today, in fact. If we look at some of the artwork that we have in here, the beautiful artwork, which I just keep having to highlight, and in fact I've put quite a lot of it into this video, you'll find that with the exception of Dark Reapers and Shuriken weapons replacing Eldar las guns as the default weapon, it was merely a 40-point upgrade in Rogue Trader for a squad, the runes and language, all of it is pretty much identical to the modern symbols that we get to see today. No actual models, however, are shown back in this original book. Instead, all we get is these interesting hand-drawn aspect warriors that you see before you right now. So, moving on, in 1994, we reach the 2nd edition of the Eldar. Now, I didn't expect to see much evolution over what we got in the first set of rules, the Rogue Trader era. For me, it's been over 20 years since I looked at the Codex Eldar from 2nd edition, and when I last read this book, and it turns out I forgot a lot. This book is full of insane 1990s art. We actually meet the Wraith constructs for the first time here. We also get to see the Harlequins, the Exodites, and the Corsairs in this book. What struck me most was when I reached the point where I get to see all the painted miniatures in this book. The painted miniatures in this section are actually well, they're gorgeous. There's lavish use of very bright colours, the attention to detail. They're picking out not just the runes, but painting them in contrasting colours instead of the more muted tones of today. The Eldar are a race which I feel the more modern, realistic or military modeler depictions, the styles that you see most of all these days, they actually do the range a disservice here. Overall, the Eldar in 2nd edition are a nice evolution of the rogue trader Eldar. The silly half-breeds are gone, as are the bits of technology which are more like Imperial technology, las guns are looking at you, and instead they've embraced their own unique war gear and bizarre wraith constructs. Just look at the armies of the time, they're truly unique. Next up, strangely enough, we reach 3rd edition, the class of 1999, and we really just get more of the same. The difference with 3rd edition is we finally got some plastic models in the range, and the Codex is notable for its inclusion of many Golden Demon winning miniatures, such as the Star-Spangled Wraith Lord. We also get some interesting Wraithguard painted up in here. We also get some more dynamic colour schemes for Craftworld, and you tell me that you don't love this army by Jonas Estamos. I believe that's how you pronounce that. Apologies to him if I'm wrong. And his Magnar Craftworld. Come on, I dare you, tell me you don't love this army. The Codex isn't a revolution exactly. In fact, well, this Codex, it's barely an evolution. It actually stripped away things like the Exodites, the Harlequins, the Corsairs, in favour of more Craftworld technology and fleshing out the special characters more. It was further expanded by the supplemental codex Craftworld Eldar in the year 2000, and at the time, this mini-codex cost barely half of what the parent codex did, and in the space of just 24 pages, it gave you expanded rules which added not just one Craftworld, but 6 different Craftworlds. These days in 40k, you can expect to pay 2/3 the cost of a full codex and receive just one sub-faction. So, needless to say, you were spoiled in the late 1990s. The codex isn't a masterpiece by any means, but it's short, it's sharp, and it does everything required. It was a time when simplicity was the thing, the game was less bloated, and rules were consequently a lot easier to write, and balance. For your viewing pleasure, I'll now include a few images of the different Craftworlds sampled in this mini-dex, and I dare say, the last great innovation in the Eldar range. In 2006, the Eldar range was somewhat consolidated with the arrival of the 4th edition book. This book is kind of strange. It came in the middle of what you would probably turn out to be one of the best editions of the game, 4th edition. But it contained obvious power creep, thanks to the new Universal Special Rules system, which granted a lot of rules to the range, such as Fleet of Foot for the whole army, at a time when the Tau, Necrons, and Sisters of Battle, they were all still rooted in 3rd edition rules, and so they lacked special rules like this across their army. This was soon rectified, but it was still brutal on arrival. The book lacks the vibrant miniatures and displays of previous editions. In this edition, the rules are, well, they're perfectly serviceable, taking the 3rd edition rules and cut-pasting them with the added USRs for the most part. The Craftworld Codex was superseded by this book and replaced by a much more vanilla codex. The entries are, as you can see, kind of bland. They're very matter-of-fact and lack visible passion. The previous books, all 4 of them in fact, featured some beautiful artwork and a lot of really well-painted different armies. Much of the artwork in this book is simply recycled, and the new artwork, wherever you do actually see it, it lacks the soul, it lacks the passion. The Phoenix Lords is the most depressing part in this book, because when you get to them, they don't even have a page devoted to them. They don't even have a picture of the Phoenix Lords in this book. Just a little blurb, barely a couple of paragraphs long. But hey, it's not all bad. At least the Harlequins are back. You see, the big problem with the 4th edition Eldar Codex is that it's the same as the 4th edition Chaos Codex. Namely, it's a boring book which doesn't have any of the uniqueness of the earlier books. The 4th edition Codex like 3.5 Chaos, Imperial Guard, Space Marines, they all had huge war gear sections and massive customization. Mid and late 4th edition codexes are just vanilla paste, and they rapidly fell into irrelevance next to the newer codexes of 5th edition. Wait, 5th edition? Yes, that edition. For you see, from 2006 until 2014, the Craftworlds of the Eldar had only the 4th edition book to their name, at the same time as Matt Ward was swinging like a wrecking ball through 5th edition, and smashing apart Space Marines, Blood Angels, Necrons, Grey Knights, right before reforming them into the most powerful factions to ever exist. The Eldar had to feel their 12-year-old rules against this. How bad was it? Well, at the same time as your Guardians were Toughness 3, fired Strength 4 weapons which could only shoot to 18 inches, only had 4+ saves, and were 8 points a model, well, the average Necron player, they came on with Immortals that were Toughness 4, had Strength 5 guns. They had 24 inches range, and every roll of a 6 to hit gave them 2 extra hits. They had a 3+ save and cost the same as 2 Guardians. On top of this, they had higher leadership and could reanimate. Oh, but Macca, some may say. The Immortal isn't a direct comparison to a Guardian, it's more an elite's choice. Well, that's the point. But like I said, this is the average Necron player, and this is what they were bringing to the battle. The point I'm trying to illustrate here is that the Eldar were totally outgunned and totally outclassed. Yeah, they could put bodies in the field at 2-to-1 odds in their favour. Problem was, their enemies were able to kill them far faster than the Eldar were able to kill their enemies. This meant that a stagnation began to set in, and over the long period from 2006 to 2013-2014, the Eldar slowly started to vanish. It's not that players didn't have armies anymore, that people weren't getting into them and collecting them. It's not that people didn't enjoy Eldar as a faction. It was simply that it's no fun spending 12 years as the punching bag of every other faction. Armies such as the Tau, Necrons, Dark Eldar, they all got new codexes in this time. And not only that, they got a host of new units alongside this, and most of their toys, especially anything essential, were rendered in plastic. The Eldar, however, they languished in purgatory, hamstrung by ancient rules 2 editions removed, with models mostly from the mid-1990s. Then, something happened. Something which changed the Eldar from shit tier to, well, shit tier, but with style. The doom of Chimera and Forge World struck in 2011. Whilst a mere side note to the hobby as a whole, Chimera did 3 things. First, it added a new aspect in the form of the Shadow Spectres. It fleshed out the long-dead Corsairs faction, and lastly, added a host of sorely needed new vehicles to the Eldar range. A range that consisted of basically the Warwalker, Wave Serpent, Falcon, Fire Prism and Viper since the 1990s, and the Night Spinner was added in 2006. The new vehicles included things like the Hornet, Nightwings, Phoenix Bombers, Warp Hunters, Firestorms, the Super Heavy Lynx, the Scorpion, the Cobra, the Vampire, the Hunter, the monstrous Wraithseer, which is one of my favourite models to this day, and of course, the Revenant and Phantom Titans. Needless to say, it was a massive breath of fresh air into the life of the Eldar, and it actually started to rebuild the Eldar community. As they were seeing some support for their faction, this meant that people were starting to pull out their old kits and add these Forge World models to them. This rolled neatly into the release just a couple of years later of 6th edition Eldar. Now the 6th edition Eldar Codex is controversial. You see, many people have probably forgotten it, what with the pace of change which occurred over the last 6 years with 2 whole new editions and 2 Eldar Codexes since that time, but I remember it all too well. If you were an Eldar player sick of being a punching bag, boy did things turn around for you. First up, the book was a far more visually pleasing book. It actually contained a lot of colourful artwork, and not only that, but it was new artwork. Individual craft worlds actually had some attention paid to them, and, rules aside, even individual unit entries had some style again. The range itself was expanded with the addition of plastic Wraithguard and Wraithblades, the Crimson Hunter, and the mighty Wraith Knight. Then you saw the rules. Problem was, the Eldar in 6th edition, they were broken as shit. First, it was the little things. The Eldar could run and fire with no penalty, not even a snapshoot penalty, which would have made sense. They may as well have just made them all 9-inch move on all models for all that it mattered. Even the Warwalker could run for free, which is strange because it's not even Eldar, it's a machine. The basic shuriken weapon? Yeah, it gained pseudo-rending. On 6s to wound, enemy units just didn't get a save against it. Well, look, that was okay on small squads of Guardians, but on big squads rocking bulk shuriken cannons, such as jet bikes? Ouch. Then you got to the D-weapons. The way D-weapons worked back then was on 6s to wound, these weapons not only could wound anything in the game, they could not only automatically penetrate any vehicle, but they also caused instant death and ignored armor saves. And there were units which fielded whole squads of these things. The cherry on top of this was the 1-2 combination of Wave Serpents and the Wraith Knight, a monstrous creature the size of a Warhound Titan, which cost not even a third of the points. It was impossible to wound with Strength 4 weapons, had 6 wounds, moved as fast as a Bloodthirster, and came stock with 2 Strength 10 AP2 D weapons and 36 inches range. This thing required sometimes whole armies to take it down, and what's worse, it cost barely more points than a freaking Land Raider. The Wave Serpent, on the other hand, was merely a transport tank. It did have one minor gimmick, this teensy tiny little shield. Well, Macca, that doesn't sound so bad, you say? Well, just like the evil occult store clerk off The Simpsons, prepare to play a game of that's good, that's bad. First, it could drop the shield, making it easier to kill. That's good. The shield, though, became a gun. Oh, that's bad. The gun has no AP. Oh, that's good. The gun is ranged 60 inches, has D6+1 shots which are pinning and ignore cover on a dedicated transport. That's bad. You may go now. Pretty bad, huh? Well, strap in and bite down, because it gets worse. You see, in this time, the Eldar also made best friends for life with the Tau. And the Taudar, the unholy fusion of elf and fish, was born. The Taudar proceeded to win top spot every single tournament, event, game, hell, they even beat some insurgents in Iraq back in 2014. They were nigh unstoppable. The Wraith Knights were the tankiness that the Tau lacked. The Tau had a massive firepower edge, made infinitely stronger by Eldar Farseers and D-weapons, and units which buffed everything, with better saves, better shooting. Units which normally ran in and assaulted Tau gun lines, they would end up running into Wraith Knights now and getting bogged down endlessly against these unkillable giants. The community was in uproar. I'm not going to show you any Taudar armies, as I don't want to make it look like I'm singling people out, but Google it for yourself and see what you get. These armies are mostly low-effort net lists, barely painted, if at all, and only rarely did a shining gem of an army with actual passion behind it appear. If it sounds like I'm bitter at the situation, I'm not. For you see, I laid all this out for you in order to demonstrate how we got to a new point. The point of Eldar player hatred. You see, the Eldar, they were never super popular. They were never as popular as Space Marines and Chaos. But they had a big, dedicated following. That following spent over a decade waiting for a new book, and when they finally got it, few of them had the chance to really enjoy it. The units you wanted to see loved, such as the Aspect Warriors, they were rather middling. The flavour of the faction became cheap transports and endless Wraith unit spam. If anyone pulled out an Eldar list at a tournament, the other players would just roll their eyes and moan. Eldar players copped massive comp score hits at tournaments. In short, they went from the grey man of 40k, the faction which was always present but usually only played by the older guy at the store, who spun tales of how great 2nd and 3rd edition were. Stop looking at me like that. Instead, they became the #1 most hated faction, likened to Dragowing Grey Knights from 5th edition. The people who loved this faction, who poured such love and affection into it for decades, were stabbed in the back by the netlist crowd, who made the army feel so toxic that everyone hated all Eldar simply on principle. 6th edition also saw a lackluster Eandon supplement codex and the addition of numerous detachments and data slates. All of this neatly flowed into the 7th edition of 40k, and this of course also flowed into the 8th edition of 40k. The thing was, 7th edition toned down things like the Eldar by getting rid of it through the basic rulebook rather than the Codex, and it took the Wave Serpents down a peg as well as the Wraith Knight, but all jet bikes could suddenly all take shuriken cannons. It was a clusterfuck. 8th edition was simply more of the same for the Eldar, their units being massively weakened by the new rules in many cases, and their once unkillable Wraith units took a massive hit. As of 9th edition, they're pretty lackluster, with Harlequins in one book, Craftworlds in another, and a weird Ynnari faction making a mockery of their background by attempting to reconcile Dark Eldar and the Craftworlds, kind of like Warhammer End Times did with the Elven factions there. And just like that, it has about as much nuance as pushing two people together in Harvey Weinstein's office and shouting "kiss." That turned dark fast. See, we've reached the end of looking at these codexes, and now we reach this most terrible of slides. This is a collage I've put together. It looks at all of the releases that have happened for the Eldar that are on Games Workshop's website currently. As you can see, half of the range came out in 4th edition back in 2006, a third in the 1990s, and the remainder is everything released in the last 14 years. Pretty pathetic, huh? I'll drive the point home a bit here with this next sad image. Pictures of the Avatar of Cain, the same model that has now been in production for at least 26 years and still sold at full price. The Eldar are an interesting case study to me. A faction that, as of recording, hit its peak exactly 20 years ago, which on the tabletop hit a crescendo of power 6 years ago. It's in dire need of new miniatures and more flavour, and yet languishes in the purgatory of mediocrity. Even factions such as the Space Marines, that were once a do everything in every squad type faction compared to the Eldar's unique specialisation of having individual squads that did one thing extremely well. All the Space Marines have taken that from them, with whole units dedicated, just like Eldar Aspect Warriors, to achieving one goal. The Eldar's flavour, it's vanishing. The faction, it needs new models, it needs new love, and most of all, it needs good supplements which bring back all the different craft worlds and the unique flavours associated with them. On top of this, it needs rules that really play up to their strengths, and right now, they're not in a good place. But there is hope for the future. Recent releases like Eldrad and the Howling Banshees show that there is a lot that can be done, and with the new technology of today, man, there are some beautiful models that can be made. But until that happens, the Eldar are stuck in the same place they've been, more or less for 20 years. Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching this episode. Thoughts and feedback in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.